Hello and welcome along to the Panto podcast. My guest in this episode is Bernie Clifton. At a remarkable 83 years old, this sprightly fellow is still joking around and still a child at heart as well. Bernie's a true pioneer and face of variety and a real character, which I'm sure if you listen to this episode you'll understand just what I mean. I'd also like to thank Bernie for introducing me to some very wonderful people on the day of the recording. It's not the longest episode in the series, but we were a little bit limited for time. I'd also like to thank somebody by the name of Jackie Toduff, who gave me absolutely wonderful hospitality when it came to the recording venue and his wonderful hotel in Derbyshire. So please sit back and enjoy the latest Panto podcast. Well, my guest today for the Panto podcast is comedy legend Bernie Clifton. Hello, Bernie.
Oh, no, he isn't. That's a clue. It's lovely to be here. Thank you, Hayden. And I'm looking forward to chatting to you and about whatever you want to talk about.
Well, primarily pantomime and obviously yourself and your career. Where did it begin for you?
Where did it begin? Well, it was. I was always fortunate. I always had kind of a singing voice, and so I used to get up and do a turn in the pubs and the clubs back in St Helens, where every pub had a singing room, and that's what you did. You filtered into the singing room, and in the corner was a man on a piano, and the drunker you got, the more courage you got, and that's how it kind of started. And,
how old were you then?
I was 73. I was 15. We lived in Charles Street in St Helens. Bottom of the street was the Theatre Royal. We went down once, and there was an audience participation variety show on. And the man said, "You and you." So we leapt out the audience, me and Bernard Moore. And he said to Bernard Moore, "You stand on that corner of the seat, and I'll give you a mop, and you can make love to the mop. And I want you to say, since the first moon came over the first mountains, I have always adored you." So Bernard Moore went, "Since the first moon came over the first mountain, I've adored you." He says, "And you," pointing at me, "you can sing." So I went, "Oh, all right." So he went deathly quiet, and I started to sing a song that was famous at the time by George Clooney's auntie, Rosemary Clooney. Some of your older listeners will remember. And it was called, "If you love me half as much as I love you, you wouldn't hurt me half as much as you do. You're nice to me when you're no one else around." And suddenly the theatre became quiet. This deathly hush descended. And I thought, "You only build me up to let me down." And I thought, what's going on here? This is better than plumbing. and the end of the song was received with rapturous applause, and I thought, well, I don't quite know what happened there, but I just felt my life might have changed, and that was it. You get addicted, don't you? You get hooked.
So where did the comedy come in?
Oh, well, that was it. Well, I lived on Merseyside, which was a breeding ground for comedy. I worked on a building site with Scousers and Irish labourers and people, ex-servicemen just been in the war and come out. And there was a lot of mischief going about, building site humour, and I wouldn't have. Just to give you a quick example, we had a gas fitter called Jack Topping, who used to cycle from Liverpool every day, 25-mile round trip, and to save the shilling a day allowance he got for coming on the bus, he bought this bike. So, and then he used to park it. He was exhausted, so he gives a cup of tea. "Oh, I was a little exhausted, like." And when he went off on the building site doing his gas fitting, we took his bike apart and filled the frame of his bike full of lead. So bits of sheet lead, bit of lead here, a bit of lead there, here a lead, there a lead. So by the end of about 2 months, Jack Topping looked like Mr. Universe. he was cycling. So the mentality, the do anything for the crack, was imbued in me from a very, very early age, and eventually sold the bike because he had to and took up sumo wrestling. But I was in the middle of this humour. There's something about Merseyside, and I was 10 miles down the road from Knotty Ash, where the governor lived, and inspired by him from a very early age So that's where the comedy was always that's why it took prime place. I always had a singing voice, but the comedy was always there. It was in me bones.
Were you a funny child then at school?
I wasn't really funny. I was like, there was humour in the house. We'd go out and we had something called the 10 o'clock rally. We'd go to, when we were teenagers, we'd go to the Sunday cinema, and there would be awful films on back in the 50s. And we would sit in, and as the cinema clock got around to 10 o'clock, we had secreted on our persons, about 15, 20 of us, small musical instruments like a mouth organ or a little motor horn or a kazoo or a comb and paper, anything that made a noise. And as it reached 10 o'clock, somebody would shout, 10 o'clock rally! And in the darkness, they'd count down from 10, and this cacophony of sound would break out, and it was just for the nonsense, just for the crack. And the lights would go up, and the commissioners would come down and try and evict us, and we haven't got anything because we passed all the instruments along to the end of the row. So that was very much part of my upbringing.
So it was always a bit of zaniness going on there.
Always, yeah. I think it was accepted. It wasn't peculiar to us. It was something that everybody did. And yet, I did a bit of research a few years ago. I don't know of any other towns in the north that had cottoned on to this malarkey, this 10 o'clock rally malarkey. So maybe it's individual to St Helens. I'm not sure.
So for your first actual gig, when it came to performing?
Yeah, well, me and a friend of mine called Terry O'Connor, he could play the accordion, and I got this singing voice, and we went out as the two Terrys, and he played the accordion, and there was a song at the time called Davy Crockett. It was like based on this legendary frontiersman in the American South, and it was Davy Crockett, king of the wild frontier, born on a mountaintop of Tennessee, biggest braves in the land, and he was playing on the accordion, and I'd come running out the gents with a Davy Crockett hat on, backwards, and with an arrow sticking out my shirt, shouting, Indians, Indians, and then I'd finished the song. And I can see from the expression on your face that you can't understand why we weren't world stars by the age of 18. So that was how. And then I got a job singing at the Quark Ballroom. And this was a dream for me to on Saturday night to stand up and sing all the hits of the time with a little orchestra, with a dance band. But I was after three months I was sacked because I got bored with the singing, and we used to borrow, me and Gordon Spencer, we used to borrow the bike, the doorman's bike. And during the last waltz, when all the lads were trying to build it up, me and Gordon Spencer set up this jousting. We'd ride up and down the middle of the dance floor with a couple of curtain poles, trying to knock each other off. And people would stop pulling girls and stop dancing and just cheer us on. And it was obvious to me that I couldn't do that along with my singing job. So I decided, I didn't decide to leave. I was asked by the manager. I was told by the manager, Sylvester Burroughs, you're out. And my friend Gordon said, oh, leave him alone, he's all right. He said, leave him alone? All right? He's got no bloody shirt on. Well, you couldn't go jousting with a shirt on, could you? So that was my teenage years in St Helens. So it was very much part of my DNA.
Did you go and see Panto then?
Panto, not for many, many, many years. I got through, I joined the Royal Air Force. Well, I didn't join. The Queen rang me and said, do you fancy coming, doing a couple of years defending the realm, because the Russians are getting a bit leery. So I went, okay, and at the time I was a plumber. So and I was the world's worst plumber. I'd been given my own house to plumb. And at the end, towards the end of my 5-year apprenticeship, they said, right, you've plumbed that house from start to finish. They've decorated it. All you've got to do is go and turn the water on and just check for leaks. So I went up, I went to the house that was ready to be occupied by some tenants. And I turned all the water on, and I went upstairs and I checked for leaks in the bathroom. I checked for leaks in the kitchen. No sign of this. I thought, well, I'm probably not as bad a plumber as I thought I was. And suddenly from the bottom of the stairs, I heard this wheezing sound. And I looked down the stairs, and there was an old joiner, old Tommy. I said, you all right, Tommy? He said, I've been in building trade, he said, for 40 years, and I've never seen water coming out of a 13-amp socket. And I looked, and he was right. And there was the whole house was waterlogged. There was water in the plaster, there was water in the electric pipes, in the conduit, and there were 3 little dribbles coming out of this 13-amp socket. And what I'd done, I raced upstairs, opened up the airing cupboard, and I hadn't fitted the 3-inch blanking cap on the top of the hot water cylinder where I should have. And so as the water filled up and the system filled up, so it overflowed into the... And I don't think the house has ever been occupied. In fact, I think 10 years later, they were using it as a sort of an underwater microbiology centre for St Helens. So I was doomed as a plumber, but I was posted in the RAF in my national service to Lindholm, RAF Lindholm near Doncaster, and where I got £3 10 shillings a week for keeping the Russians at bay. It was the Bomber Command Bombing School, where we were training pilots and bomb aimers to drop bombs on Russia, while over in Moscow they were training their own people to drop bombs on us. This was the height of the Cold War. These were dangerous times. But I discovered that down the road in Doncaster there was hundreds and hundreds of entertainment venues, working men's clubs, minders' welfares and pubs. And I also found out that, because I rang a local agent, that if I went along on a Sunday and did a noon and night, 2 shows, he would pay me £4 without even seeing me or hearing me. And I thought, well, that's not bad. £4 for a Sunday and £3 10 shillings for working for the Queen for a week. So what I did, I used to go down on Sundays. I used to borrow the flight sergeant's bike without his permission. I used to ride into I had my smart suit on. I had a gabardine Mac, and I actually had a pair of bike clips, and it was a situation that seemed natural to me. Rode into Doncaster, all weathers, fit as a butcher's dog I was, hide the bike round the back of a church, get a bus out to this mining village somewhere, come back. The bike was always there. Amazingly, it was. If it had been stolen, I don't know what my future might have been. And so, come the end of my national service, I stayed in Doncaster, and I became domiciled. I ended up getting married, raised a family. I've been around here for the rest of my life, and basically all because of the work ethic that I think I probably always had. But pantomime still wasn't even round the corner. You know, I had to get into the show business proper. And my first summer season was with Max Bygrave's son, Anthony Bygraves, down in Devon, Babbacombe. Couldn't afford digs, so bought a caravan for 200 quid, bought a tow bar for a tenner, and towed a caravan down and put the kids in local school. That was 1969. And even then, it would be another 5 or 6 years before I got involved in Panto.
Did you not go and never see them then as a child?
Oh, I'd go and see them. Yeah. We actually we lived in Charles Street at number 59. It was 2 bedrooms. There was 5 boys, so the sleeping arrangements I can just leave to your imagination. And but we had a sofa in the front room, and my mum took a lodger in for Panto season. He was an actor called Gideon Selva. I've never forgotten him, and he played the Demon King in this Panto. And we all went to see him because and our lodger turned out, and he was painted green from head to foot. He terrified us, and he slept on the sofa in the front room for 6 weeks. Gideon Selva, wonder what happened to him. But we were, and funnily enough, it was only after his absence that I noticed that we now had a green 3-piece suite because there was no one for him to wash off his makeup. So those were my early days. Yeah, pantomime was always there. And I was thrilled. By now we're into the mid-70s to get involved in pantomime with a guy called Bunny Barron. And the first pantomime was at Lewisham Town Hall with a cast of several, and I was totally out of my depth. But we had a great time. I worked with a man called Len Lowe, who was a bit of a legend, Panto legend, knew all the gags in the sun. And one of the routines was that we got the boys and girls to shout out their names, and that I would bring a donkey on, and the donkey would talk to them personally. So they'd all shout their names out. I'd go in the wings and bring this donkey on and hold in front of the donkey's mouth a sugar-coated microphone. And when I did that, the donkey went and licked his lips. And meanwhile, off stage, someone would go, "Hello, John. Hello, hello, Mabel. Hello." And the boys got this fantastic talking donkey. Until one night there was some snow, and the donkey was held up. So I went into the wings for the donkey, and the princess said to me, Hilly, her name was. She went down and she gave me a pet poodle. She went, "The donkey's not coming. It's been held up trying to take an animal out." So I got the poodle under my arm, and I went, "Okay," and I shoved the sugar-coated mic under the poodle, hoping that it would start to lick the microphone. Instead, it went, "Oh!" just had a nervous breakdown. So it was etched in me, the joys and the hassle that's involved in pantomime, but great fun. I've done well over 40 pantomimes now, and it's been super. Yeah, great innings.
Have you ever thought about becoming the baddie?
Well, not the baddie. No. I'm not relegated. I've adopted the guise of the Baron, where I used to be Buttons, or I'd be Buttons is a good part, as indeed is like wishy-washy when you're in Aladdin. But it became evident because I used to stop the show halfway through when I was wishy-washy and say to the dame, "Mum, can I have a word with you?" She went, "Yes, wishy-washy, what is it?" I said, "Well, I'm Aladdin's brother, right?" She went, "Yes, you're Aladdin's brother. And you're my mum?" "Yes, I'm your mum. How come I'm the only one in the family with a bus pass?" So from then on, the role of Baron came along, and I played Baron a few times. I played Baron in Northampton when Zoe Ball was Cinderella, Toby Anstis was Buttons, and Baron's a great part because he's a put-upon old guy, isn't he? And only recently I played Baron in Cinderella in Hull at the New Theatre with the amazing Anita Dobson, and we had a great time. And happy to say that the full production is going to the Derngate Theatre in Northampton, so I'm looking forward to being reunited with Anita, or Mrs. May as I call her, because Brian's coming to see the show, always does, and fantastic production. Working for a company called Kudos, were amazing production values. They've got over 30 pantos, and it's the top pantomime production company, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's hard. It's 2 shows a day. It's relentless, but it's great. It's great fun, and there's a plate. I always think, Hayden, that we're lucky in this business because there's a plate to step up to. There's a mark, isn't there? The bell's going to go, and you're going to go out there, and you can't wing it, you can't walk it. You've got to be on your mettle because they can suss you out if you're trying to get through it without. You've got to give them all the energy to get the energy back. So as I say, I'm very fortunate.
In 40 years, then, have you ever had moments where you didn't enjoy it?
How long have you got? Well, but there's always a kind of perverse enjoyment. I mean, certain matinees are given over to, perhaps in one respect, it was the local transport department, all the bus drivers, all the bus conductors, and all their families. They bought the theatre out, and you were warned before the show that this is going to be hell. And you go out there and you try and laugh your way through it. And this cacophony of noise and baying, and then at the time to have sweets thrown on the stage, which is very dangerous because you can't see them coming, but you just soldier on and get through it, and somehow you do. Still a lucky bunch.
To ask the question that has always puzzled me, where did Oswald actually come from, the ostrich?
Well, it's an old trick. It's an old panto. It's not even a panto trick. It's an old it's over 100 years. The false leg. Did you know there were false legs? Did you? Did anybody ever tell?
What? Yeah. Spoiler alert.
Split it now. And somebody sent me a sketch of somebody they'd seen doing the gig on the street. So I sent the sketch to a guy called Peter Pullen, And this is mid-70s, and at the time Peter was making all the props for Keith Harris, Orville and Cuddles. He was making the Honey Monster for the TV adverts. He made Rod Hull's Emu. This was Peter, genius prop maker. And I gave him, and he went, yeah, I think I know that. Yeah, I know what this is. I can do this. And he gave me a ring. About a month later, I went down, and he said, come and try it on. So I went to his workshop, and I jumped on this ostrich, and I thought, well, what is this? So what? What is it? So I ran out into the street in the middle of Coventry one busy afternoon and stopped the traffic, and the whole of Coventry came to a standstill because this lunatic was running around on the back of an ostrich. And I thought, hello, this is interesting, what's going on here? And eventually, and that was just the start of the story, because it took 2 or 3 years of constant refining and improving to make the thing so realistic, and it transpired that if you were to read the book of The Elephant Man about Joseph Merrick, his manager, I think his name was Sam, or Dorn, D-O-R-N, I'm not quite sure, Sam, he had a similar prop made of paper mache, and he used to, he had a music hall in Nottingham, and he used to jump on this thing that he called his daddy-o and cavort around, and he had a song. I've got the words to the song, and it was a way of clearing the establishment at the end of the night, because here I am on daddy-o, and it's time that you've got to go. So there's an old expression in this business, isn't there, Hayden, that there's nothing new. There's always a refurbishment or a renovation of something that's gone before, and that's what I found myself in. But I think the secret was that we worked and worked and worked on improving until we had the finished article.
Do you remember the first time you actually took him out on the road and put him in the act?
Yeah, I took him to I took him to Germany for a TV show in Germany, and I hadn't got a trunk for him. All I'd got was a big box that a washing machine had been in, and when I got to the airport in I think it was Munich. I can't remember the name of the airport, and I was asked to open the box, and I opened the box, and there's a pair of human legs sticking in there. Well, that took some explaining with my lack of German, but subsequently it became part of my act, and then was seen by Louis Benjamin, who was casting for the Royal Variety Show that year. And I came on, and we had a second ostrich by this time. We had a spare ostrich. So I came on and did my 5 minutes on the ostrich and then ran off. And the ostrich came on its own, as if I'd jumped off it. And that was, that kind of changed my life, I think, that night, because the Queen was there and she absolutely loved it. And it resulted in me getting a lot of TV work, a series with ATV television as it was. So I was properly on my way after 20 years of slapping about, So no regrets.
That was the big break then?
Yeah, it was a break, yeah. And it got me on television. It got me known sort of nationally as a name, albeit as an ostrich jockey. But, there were opportunities in those days to tour and do long summer seasons and long pantomimes. And I always had a retinue of little ostriches, all the young dancers, the kids. They would come on and we'd do a production number with half a dozen or a dozen baby ostriches. So that was, I was pretty set firm by that time, especially in Panto.
What is it that you think was the trick of it for you to break into Panto with the ostrich and with the children? Was it always this child-friendly, family-friendly thing?
I think it was at a time when I was perfectly suited for the audiences that I was entertaining. 3 generations of the same family. 3, your grandparents, mum and dad, and the children, all sitting together, all enjoying something in common. Whereas now, to get that rarely happens. The things have moved on, and kids usually got their snouts tucked into iPads or electronic devices, haven't they? But at the time, back to 40 years ago, it was the thing to do, to go on summer season, take your kids, take your parents, and watch a show, a variety show, family variety show. So there was a lot of nudge, wink, wink in there, and plenty of innuendo, but it was something that was aimed at families, and that, I think, it was right for its time.
Was that, though, the direction you wanted to go in?
Perfectly, yeah. I mean, TV's fine. TV's great and cabaret's great, but to be in a theatre where everything is organised so that you will be seen to your best effect, and with an audience that's suited for you, whether it's holiday camps, holiday centres, theatres, summer season, it was just my bag, just right for me. I was in the right place at the right time.
And you enjoyed that?
Absolutely, yeah.
More than the working men's clubs?
Well, yeah, but they were still there, you know. I did sort of graduated from them, but I had to earn my corn and learn my trade in those clubs. And back in the day, it was tough. If they liked you, you know, they let you live. And comics were described as, he's all right if you don't mind laughing. It was tricky. I remember going to a pub in Doncaster, and every Monday at 6 o'clock they had a happy minute. It was tough, but we were in it. The closer you are to the centre of it, you don't see it as tough. It's the way it was, and you learn how to deal with difficult crowds and how to hone your material. So, right place, right time.
Very much so. What about then the song sheets when you performed them? When you were the
song sheet,
characters?
Yeah. Perfect for me. I had a variety of musical instruments. It was always Old MacDonald had a farm, and I'd get the kids up and save the little 5-year-old to the end and give him or her the trombone to play, which they hardly could. So that was a wonderful moment in panto, and it's an essential, isn't it, of pantomime, the song sheet at the end. Although, ironically, we didn't have one in Hull last year, so I don't know if there's plans to have one in Northampton. But to me, it was always a tradition that towards the end of the show that the comic would do a front cloth while they were setting for the finale, of course.
And for you, was that your favourite part of the?
No, it was all part of the job. I love getting the kids up and hearing them talk about themselves and the parents and the innocence of children, you know, and just chatting to them. So you're there at all levels. You go out at the beginning of the panto, 100 mile an hour to get their attention, get them on side, and then be used as a sort of a side to the plot. The plot's important, but every now and again the comics have got to come on and go Joey, bang, 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 and now back to the plot to keep the momentum going. So it was all part of the package.
And the slosh scenes.
Yeah, done a bit of slosh in my time, had a few pies in my face. Got that, when you get that crazy foam up your nose and you can't breathe, I try telling the audience. There's always, in routines where you're smashing plates. They love all that, don't they, kids? Seeing plates coming down a slider, crash, and then until you're knee deep in broken crockery. Children love all that. So that, yeah, it's part of the package, isn't it?
What part then of the pantomime would you say is your absolute favourite?
Well, funnily enough, it was the poignancy of as Buttons when he realises he's lost, that Cinderella doesn't love him, and that's always a wonderful tearjerker, isn't it? And having a song to sing, and also, and it still works with me with Baron and Cinderella. When she's in her cups because things have gone wrong with her, you know, she can't go to the ball, to be able to sing to your daughter, and I always like the two sides of the coin, as Ken Dodd used to say. I know how to make them laugh. Now I've got to learn how to make them cry. So you could give them the full. It's the two masks, isn't it? And I get a lot of pleasure from that, to stretch the audience's belief, and to sing a lovely song with the emotion, whether it's your daughter, or whether it's Cinderella as your daughter, or Cinderella as your lost love. I think there's always room in a pantomime. Again, it's stretching the package, something for everyone.
And favourite pantomimes for you?
Got to be Cinderella as Buttons, because you've got everything, because Buttons got it all, hasn't he? He's a cheeky chappy, he loves Cinderella, that's obvious, and it only becomes obvious that she loves him, but only like a brother. And there's that wonderful moment when, I love you, Buttons, but only like a brother. And I used to do that phrase almost musically. Oh, 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 only like a brother, and drop the last, like a brother, drop it, that last tone, which is tragedy. To take the audience with you on your journey. Bless him, little buttons there. He's never had a chance anyway, but he thought he had. So that's proper.
And what about people you've worked with over the years? Because you must have worked with some names over.
Yeah, absolutely. In my time, I mentioned Len Lowe, and I worked in Panto with all the great dames, with Joe Black, Billy Dainty. I worked with Little and Large when they were playing Broker's Men, and there's always room. I've worked with great magicians as well. I even worked with Rod Hull. And there was Rod on his emu and me on the ostrich, and that was interesting. It was there's always room. I think you've got to be generous. I think you're a family in a pantomime. You are a family, and I think you should look out for each other. Never mind getting precious about he or she has got a better line than I've got. Just go out there, give it your best, and then try and support each other, because it's pretty manic. It's 2 shows a day, 12 shows a week, and sometimes, heaven forbid it'll ever happen again, was 3 shows on a Saturday, on a Friday and a Saturday, when you don't know where you are. You're doing 3 shows, you can hear the lines coming out, but you don't know whether you've done them twice in this show or once or whatever. So fortunately, I hope I never do another 3 show a day. 2's plenty.
When then did you actually go from comic to Baron? How many years ago was that?
Well, the first one would be about 25 years ago at Northampton, and because it was Zoe Ball and Toby Anstis, who were up, like Romeo and Juliet, if you like, and I was by now a different generation. So that was my first Baron. And interesting is that 25 years later, I've got the same role, which is the shoes fit very comfortably, because in a production of that note, the Baron comes on, bang, bang, crash, bang, wallop, off, plot, plenty going on again, bump, 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 with all my props, the visuality that I bring to the production. It's perfect for me.
The attention then from children, because obviously the act, has it changed much over the years? Have you had to adapt it for the new generation of children?
Not really, because what I do, because of the visuality, because of the visuals that I employ, it cuts through the topicality. And of course, there's a lot of topicality, there's a lot of current stuff going on in pantomime. You have to relate to what's going on outside, politically or whatever. They can be slipped in as asides. But in the main, my props, the visual effects that I use have stood the test of time. And it's low, I would call it low comedy. It's aimed for the belly laughs. It's not too erudite, or it's just where it should be for pantomime.
Does Oswald still make appearances now?
Yes, but the funny thing is, everybody says, "Is that your first one?" And it's the 9th one I've had. The funny thing is, every time I get a new one, he's a bit slower than the one I had before. In fact, the last one, I think he's almost locked in reverse gear. So I met the Queen, a couple of years ago, and I was introduced by Keith Simmons, and he said, "Your Majesty, this is Bernie Clifton, who entertained you on the Royal Variety Show many years ago." And she went, "On the ostrich," and she went, "Ostrich?" And I went, "Yes, Your Majesty, and the ostrich, 25 years later, is still performing, although much, much slower." And she went, "It's funny how things do get slower." and off she went. Wonderful. So, he's still out there, but he's more in a more sedentary package. But people would expect to see it, and you've got to give them what they want. But don't expect too much.
So he doesn't sort of run around the stalls anymore? Or?
I think the word you're looking for is limp.
What would be your advice then for young comedians listening to this?
To get into Panto, I certainly would see it as a broadening experience for your career. My feeling is that it's to a lot of stand-up now, they would see Panto as a kind of almost like a stigma. It's something that's outside of their sphere. Whereas I would say, if you can get that all-round entertainment experience under your belt, it will serve you well in whatever else you do in your career. Because you're subjected to many pressures. There's the timing. You can't overrun. You're scripted. You can't ad-lib because people are relying on what you say to reply to you on stage. And physically, it's very demanding. You're doing quick changes. You're on, and then at the end of the first finale, you've got an hour and a half. Then you'd start it all up. So physically, it's a great discipline. I would recommend any young comedian to get to try and experience Panto.
Do you go and see many Pantos yourself?
Do I?
Do you go and see many Pantos yourself now?
Rarely, because I'm always in one, you know. I've done over 40. I've seen plenty, but I tend to be occupied myself, so I don't get to see the wealth of other Pantos that you would perhaps expect.
Any different audiences then, where they found certain things funnier than others up and down the country?
Well, I think that's the secret of Panto, is that it takes you and puts you on another planet for 2 hours, doesn't it? It takes you out of your existence, whatever you're doing in your life, well, how sophisticated it might be or how demanding. Panto is like this wonderful cocoon that you're involved in for 2 hours, and you buy into it. The very fact that you paid for it, you know what you're going to get. There will be variations. There's a lot of high tech now in pantomime. A lot of the pantomimes that I've done in recent years, the standard of production is amazing. The last one in Hull, and I'm supposed to be there in Derngate as well, in Northampton, is 3D glasses. The whole audience get 3D glasses, and they have this sort of scene in the forest, and it's fantastic. I mean, the audience, they're screaming their heads off. So in that respect, I don't think Panto is being left behind. It's giving people that live experience. And again, you've got to get the kids away from their little screens and show them something that knocks them sideways.
A few years back, you tried out on The Voice. Mm-hmm. Is that something you still want to go forward with? Your
using
career?
The Voice, yeah. The best thing I ever did. I've always been a singer, and I found this opportunity of letting people at large know that I'd got a singing voice, and as a result of that, a lot of people sat up and took notice. Still have my singing lessons. Still go every week. Still improving the voice. I don't think it's something that you should ever stop doing. It's always been that sort of other channel for me that's been submerged by the comedy. But now I'm taking the wrap off, and I'm giving it a chance to be revealed. Why not?
And what do you like to sing?
Well, the coaching I'm having. I'm being trained classically, in the Italian repertoire in opera. Which again, it's an intensely difficult discipline, but it's a matter of fact that if you've got those techniques, that'll stand you in good stead. Whatever you're singing, you can sing and then sing crossover. In the Panto, I sang to Cinderella as her father last year. I sang "Love Changes Everything" to try and point out to her, which is a difficult song. It's a big ballad, so I want to feel that I'm equipped vocally to handle the big, powerful stuff.
So you're still practicing?
Well, you can't stop, can you? Somebody once said to Pavarotti, "When did you stop? When did you stop training?" And he said to them, about half an hour ago, but I'll start again tomorrow. And you don't, you stop. Whether it's because it's muscle control, it's placement. It's like dancing, isn't it? It's like movement. It's like anything in our business. You can't switch off and say, "Oh, I'll pick it up again in a month or two." Stay on it. Stay on the horse. Stay on it, and stay on till the twig breaks, and then you'll know. But for the moment, I'm a happy bunny, and I consider myself very fortunate that I've got to this age, and I'm still getting away with it, I suppose is the phrase I'm looking at. I've been rumbled by a lot of people, but not by everyone. So that's that would be my sort of postscript to say, don't ever stop. As long as you're able, just get some enjoyment out of it. Because when you stop, I don't think you can pick up the threads again as easily.
You were asked to be on the show Last Laugh in Vegas. How was that? How did that come about for a start off? And also, the whole premise of the show, even the title, The Last Laugh in Vegas, is this it? You know, your last...
Well, that was a wonder. That was the magic of the series, wasn't it? I mean, I was told off the record that they'd seen me on The Voice and then said, oh, he's not one of the ones that died then. So then, as part of that team...
Charming.
But no, but it's a truism, isn't it? If you're not seen on television, you just assume that you've shuffled off. But I was in a house, this beautiful villa in Las Vegas with 7 or 8 or 9 people who I'd grown up with in the business, my chums. Although, having said that, you don't really know people until you share a kitchen with them. And that was the magic of the series. Plus the fact that by the time we got to the show, our producer, our American producer, Frank Marino, who was convinced he was about to witness a car crash because he didn't get the ostrich at all, we actually proved him wrong, and I went out there and got a standing ovation, and he came round with tears in his eyes and said, "You proved me wrong." Yeah, so it was an amazing experience, the whole package. Again, a lot of there were pitfalls, but we've been around long enough, most of us in that show, to deal with whatever's thrown at us, and it was. I can say quite safely in terms of the performance, it was a triumph for us.
It was a great show when I watched it, and it was lovely to see yourselves out there sharing British comedy with an international audience, because it's not just Americans in Vegas, it's the whole world.
Well,
what about travelling around then, around the globe?
I've done that. Did my 20 years on the ships, and worked in Australia, did the clubs in Australia. Best audiences in the world. If they like you, they love you. They'll tell you about it. You know, my first show in Sydney many years ago was at Marrickville, and I was doing pretty well, but it was my first show in Australia, and this bloke toddled down the aisle. He said, "Hey, Pommy!" And I went, "Oh, ignored him, keep going." "Pommy!" Keep going, ignore him. "Pommy, you want a bloody drink or not?" It was fun. So I've got that under my belt. I'm working on the ships, working on the QE2. Been around the world so many times, working to international audiences, and you work out what works and what doesn't work. So keep saying it, don't I? Lucky bunny.
Even with the language barrier sometimes.
Well, I think the visuality of what I do gets you through with it, and some good songs thrown in there for good measure. I think it's made for the environment, isn't it? You know, it's like pantomime, family audience, the ships. Put in a visual comedian on who can sing. It'll cut across those language barriers.
And did the exposure help then from the Last Laugh in Vegas? Is that...
Absolutely, yeah. I've got a one-man show on the road now, which involves me going with a projector and a screen with about 100 images of everybody in the business I've ever met, from the Queen to Bob Hope to Yul Brynner to all my mates, Joe Pasquale, and of course Ken Dodd, which I do a big tribute to Ken in my act. And it's just a realisation. You need your profile. You need to keep reminding people, oh yeah, you're still active and you're still around. And that's what I plan to do for as long as I can.
Did anybody take you under their wing then? Oh, when you were developing your act?
Well, I've had a manager, Michael Vine now for 30, 40 years, and Michael, an ex-pro, very clever man, and handles all my business. He's also Darren Brown's manager, looks after Darren, and I'd always go to Michael for advice. It's that third eye, clever, and they can actually see things. And in terms of the one-man show I'm telling you about, and it's called From Crackerjack to Vegas, and it's my journey, you know, from the early days into standing ovation in Vegas, and it's part of. It's like my life story. I've not written the book yet, but I'm halfway through it, and it represents what I've done in my career and who I've met, and what I've yet to do. That's why I'm carrying on with the singing lessons. You never know. And if you keep buying these raffle tickets, you never know. You've just got to stay in there and stay in the frame. keep whatever the challenge is. Because if you say no, then what's the expression? Don't die wondering, isn't it? So yeah.
Is there anything then you'd still like to do?
I'd like to sing opera. Yeah. I'd like to carry on developing my voice and get some proper dramatic numbers under my belt and perform them. I still do that, but only on my one-man show, which I aim at studio theatres, because I want a sort of small, intimate setting. But as I said, you never know.
Albums?
What? Yes, of course. Yeah, I released a CD after The Voice, which was called The Impossible Dream, which was a song I sang on The Voice, and I've got another one. I'm cooking another one up, with, like I say, with the material on a weekly basis. I'm actually being coached and developing those skills. I'm looking for a tenor. I know there's one in there somewhere. I've just got to unveil him to the general public.
Is there anything else that you'd have done differently in your career?
You haven't got time. I've made more mistakes and took so many wrong turns but I often think, I would have done a lot differently, but then again, it wouldn't have been my story, would it? You know, when I was introduced to the head of television at Thames Television, and I thought, I know what I'll do, and I'll shake hands with him, and I did shake hands with him, but I had a jammy dodger in my hand, you know. And his expression on his face, I went, hello, it's lovely to meet you. And he went, and his jaw dropped, and he looked at his hand. And I don't think that did my career any good. And I was always slightly off that career. It's show business. And I know some very clever people in this business, but they look after the business. And I was never quite that interested in that. I was more interested in being myself and being a bit of a loose cannon. So what I've done, I don't know whether I've done it. I would have done it differently anyway. I've had a lot of fun doing stuff my way, and it's my story. It's not edited. You know, it wasn't self-edited on its way. It just took its own bumbling career path. So I don't regret that.
Well, you're still working now, and that's the good thing.
Still getting away with it, yeah.
Yeah. One last question for you then, Bernie. I always ask people this at the end of the interview. Your dream pantomime. So you can choose the production, you can be in it, you can be sitting in the stalls watching it. So I'd like to know the production, the cast, and whereabouts you'd like that to be taking place.
Well, it would be the Palladium. We get the venue out there. It would be the Palladium. I'd love the role of Baron, to be around with Baron. Anita Dobson is an absolute joy and such a sweetie to be around. And I would have people in it like Joe Pasquale. I'd have Joe there. I don't know what would he be, and the Uglies I'm working, David and Tommy at the moment. The Uglies that we've got, they're wonderful. David is an enormous man, and Tommy is Northern Ireland, and I tell you what, and I just think that the Northern Irish voice, I'm in love with it. The inflection of the accent, I'm great. So I'm not far off, apart from the venue, from being where I'd like to be in terms of Panto. I've got the right role. I'm surrounded with my mates and the right people, production values, high tech. I'm pretty well where I would want to be. So, whoever you are, thank you for that.
Well, Bernie, thank you so much for spending the time to speak to the Panto podcast.
It's my great pleasure. Is the check in the post? How does it work?
You said you wanted a tenner.
A tenner. Oh yeah, I did mention a tenner. Maybe 15, eh?
Oh, sure. You've got a mug.
My great pleasure.
You get the mug.
Whoever you are out there, get yourself and your kids and your parents and your grandparents to see a good quality Panto and pass it down the line.